Good morning, welcome to Breakfast with Naga Manchetti and Charlie State.
Our headlines today. Millions of people across the UK are now subject to tougher coronavirus restrictions after new measures came in overnight.
People in Lancashire have moved into Tier 3, the highest alert level. Greater Manchester, meanwhile, is resisting a similar move.
Shock in France as a teacher is killed in a suspected terror attack.
Tougher rules for motorists. Now drivers are to be banned from picking up and using their mobile phones.
Good morning. It's a huge day of sport with 2 rugby finals in League and Union after 2 lunchtime derbies in Glasgow and Liverpool, where Everton start on top for a change.
Good morning. It's going to be a pretty quiet weekend weather-wise. It'll often be dry, but often rather cloudy, feeling quite cool as well. All the details coming up here on Breakfast.
Good morning. It's Saturday the 17th of October. Our top story is that more than half of the UK is now under tougher coronavirus restrictions after new rules came into effect overnight.
Lancashire has become the second place in England to move into Tier 3, the very high alert level, while a 4-week circuit breaker has begun in Northern Ireland. John McManus has this report.
The politicians have told us the entire country is engaged in the fight against COVID-19. But depending where you are this weekend, the view from the barricades will look very different. This is one of Lancaster's oldest pubs. Unlike any others in Lancashire that don't also serve food, it's now closed. The county entered the highest tier, very high alert, today. That means as well as pubs closing, there's a ban on households mixing indoors, in private gardens and most outdoor venues. Local leaders have agreed a support package from Whitehall, but some of those at the sharp end are still worried.
Is it 2 weeks? Is it 3 weeks? Is it 3 months? The information is passed so poorly. We've just not understood where we stand, really. And of course, our staff are asking us questions. We can't answer them.
And there'll be more restrictions for Lancashire on Monday, when casinos, bingo halls, bookmakers, betting shops and soft play areas will also close. But gyms can stay open. That's caused some upset over in the Liverpool City region, which is also in the very high risk alert status, but where gyms have been closed. Meanwhile, leaders in Greater Manchester have been largely resisting government attempts to place the region in the highest risk status. Whitehall says it may simply impose tougher restrictions, but regional leaders are holding out for greater financial support.
I stood by all day waiting for a meeting which never took place. I understand now it will take place on Monday, and we need reassurances that this Tier 3 will be time limited and will be effective.
Boris Johnson doesn't want to impose another full lockdown. But here in Wales, that's exactly what's now being considered. A decision will be made on Monday. The First Minister says what he calls a circuit break of 2 weeks could slow down the virus. And from last night, anybody from virus hotspots in other parts of the UK are banned from entering Wales. Yesterday evening in Belfast, there was an early closing time as a 6 p.m. deadline for bars, cafes and restaurants to shut kicked in. The half-term holiday has been extended to a 2-week break to run from Monday to the 30th of October. And hair and beauty salons have also shut, and gyms face additional measures for the next 4 weeks too.
I'm going to be at home, and who's going to put food on the table for my 3 children? You know, I'm going to be left sitting at home now, absolutely no money financially. I'm in dire straits.
London, York and Essex have now joined others in the Tier 2 high alert category. It means that socialising indoors is now banned, unless it's with your own support bubble, though people can meet outside, provided they adhere to social distancing and follow the rule of 6. John McManus, BBC News.
1.5 million people in Lancashire are now under the highest level of restrictions in England.
Now, our reporter Luxmi Gopal is in Blackpool. Luxmi, morning to you. So, new rules and fresh reactions.
Yes, good morning, Naga and Charlie. Yes, that's right. 1.5 million people waking up this morning to further tighter measures here as Lancashire moves into Tier 3. And as you heard in that report there, that means pubs and bars will have to close unless they serve food. There's no mixing of households indoors or in private gardens and in some outdoor venues. Now, this is something that the Prime Minister said yesterday had been worked out with local leaders here in Lancashire. That doesn't mean it was an easy deal. The negotiations were hammered out Thursday night into Friday morning. And as you heard, it included a package of measures, financial measures to help support the area. Now, as you know, Lancashire and areas of the northwest have among the highest, quickest increasing rates of coronavirus. So this was something that was welcomed and needed by the leaders here, but it was just a matter of hammering out what those extra support measures would be. And they managed to get a slightly more generous deal than Liverpool, slightly more financial support. And of course, Tier 3 in Liverpool does not mean the same thing as Tier 3 here in Lancashire, because unlike in Liverpool, gyms and leisure centres will be able to stay open, and that of course has caused a degree of disagreement among leaders elsewhere. But the next thing to look at is whether Greater Manchester will follow and join Liverpool and Lancashire in this Tier 3 highest alert level.
It's definitely something we'll be talking about in the programme today, Luxmi. Thanks very much. Let's go, pal, there.
Well, let's speak now to our political correspondent, Jonathan Blake. Morning to you, Jonathan. So this localised plan is the one the government is sticking to. Is it conceivable there could be a national strategy that takes its place?
Morning, Charlie. It's certainly conceivable, I think. Boris Johnson's argument, as we heard him say at Downing Street yesterday, for this region-by-region approach is that there is no point in it. Would be unfair to impose restrictions in a part of the country where there is a relatively low prevalence of the virus, for example, Cornwall, and use the same measures in somewhere where COVID-19 is circulating much more strongly, for example, Greater Manchester. And that is why the government is pursuing this approach, the three-tiered approach, to impose different levels of restrictions in different places. But ever since a week ago, Downing Street attempted to engage more closely with local leaders and get elected mayors and local councils on board with the restrictions for their area. We have seen that has been a difficult process, and you've ended up with these at times torturous negotiations between local and national government about not only what are the most appropriate restrictions to have in place, but also the accompanying financial support, which many, particularly in Greater Manchester, are holding out for. So it's possible the government could well change their approach if this doesn't work, or the number of cases rises sharply nationally as well.
Jonathan, thank you.
President Macron has described the murder of a teacher on the outskirts of Paris yesterday as an Islamist terror attack.
The man was killed outside the school where earlier this month he'd shown his pupils cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad during a discussion about freedom of expression. You may find some of the details in this report by our Paris correspondent Lucy Williamson upsetting.
The horror of this attack spread slowly through the quiet streets of Conflans last night. The story of a history teacher whose lesson on freedom of expression ended with a playground full of police. The suspect, thought to have been an 18-year-old Chechen man, decapitated his victim in a nearby street, then posted an image on social media before being shot dead by police.
Police sources have confirmed to us that the motive may have been a lesson given by the victim to pupils at his school here. It was reportedly a lesson on freedom of speech, and he showed them cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad, the same cartoons, we think, that were reprinted by the satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo.
Parents say the lesson had caused some concern and that complaints on social media had sparked a debate.
He asked Muslim students to raise their hands and to leave the classroom. My son said he didn't do it to discriminate or offend, but explained that he was going to show cartoons of Muhammad and didn't want to shock them. The girls stayed behind and chose not to leave the room. That's where it started.
President Macron, arriving from a government crisis meeting, said the attacker would not succeed in dividing the nation.
Et plus largement, je veux dire ce soir à tous les enseignants de France.
I want to tell all the teachers of France tonight that we are with them, that the entire nation will be there, at their side, today and tomorrow, to protect them, to defend them. to allow them to do their job, which is the most beautiful there is, to make free citizens.
Faire des citoyens libres.
The Education Minister tweeted that unity and determination were the only responses to what he called a despicable assassination. France's National Assembly stood in silence to honour the victim yesterday, a man who, just before the attack, had wished his pupils a happy half-term with a joke. One parent said his daughter was devastated, asking, "How can I explain to her the unspeakable?" Lucy Williamson, BBC News, Conflans-Sainte-Honorine.
The law on using a mobile phone while driving is being toughened up to banish a loophole which has allowed some motorists to avoid prosecution.
Ministers want to update the legislation which was imposed before the advent of smartphones so that it bans any driver from picking up and using the devices whilst at the wheel. Here's more from our transport correspondent Tom Burridge.
It's dangerous, but a lot of drivers do it. In fact, new research found that on 765 journeys, phones were used 662 times. Only 38 of those were on hands-free. But the law right now means that only phoning or texting at the wheel is illegal. Someone taking a photo or browsing the internet can avoid a fine. Next year, that will change. It will mean any driver who touches their phone could face a £200 fine and 6 points on their licence. However, ministers have decided not to make it illegal to use your phone at the wheel if it's on hands-free. Tom Burridge, BBC News.
We're going to have a look at the papers now. Time is 11 minutes past 6 Saturday morning. Let's have a look first at the Guardian newspaper. Leading with that growing tension between Westminster and regional leaders over coronavirus restrictions. Many of the changes coming in today, of course, it reports claims by Greater Manchester's leaders that Boris Johnson has attempted to strong-arm them into accepting restrictions without providing additional money to businesses.
The Times is reporting that 1 million coronavirus tests a day will be carried out by Christmas, citing predictions from scientists. School children will be offered weekly COVID-19 screening as early as next week. The paper adds, with results being given in as little as 15 minutes.
Let's have a look at the Daily Mail, leading on plans to fine drivers £200 for touching their mobile phones while at the wheel. Currently, drivers can be prosecuted only if they use handheld devices to call or text.
Going to surprise a lot of people, that. Have you got anything that you're desperate to show?
Well, you know, these extraordinary sheepdog stories pop up every once in a while, and the value they have. I mean, the value in the work they do, but also literally the very best trained and the ones who have the best pedigree. This is a sheepdog recently who at auction went for £20,000. So
what can you do? She, he?
Well, just by all accounts is a master at obviously herding sheep. And Mrs. Jones is the lady who bought her, Donna Jones here, who said she'd been saving for some time for a new trained sheepdog. She's got 750 sheep at a farm in South Wales. And she said, I'm delighted. I'm sure Henry is going to have a wonderful time working here with my family. But of course, I mean, it's like the price of a dog. It's like an investment. It's like a piece of machinery. It's like something that's going to make the farm work. Beautiful, amazing dogs.
What's the weirdest thing you've used a tea bag for?
I can't think. Off the top of my head, I can't think. But I'm sure that's, whatever that is, I'm sure it's more extreme. What is it?
Space, the final frontier. So cosmonauts are on £110 billion International Space Station, right? There's a leak. So what do? They go into their pantry. I'm sure they don't have a pantry. They go into their resources and they get a tea bag. And what they found is they find the tea bag was swaying towards the leak, found the leak. So obviously when the tea bag looked a little bit wet, that's how they found the leak. I find it rather odd. And then they patched it up with tape.
What surprises me most is that they've got tea bags in space at all. I had no idea that they took tea bags to space. No idea at all. I just don't know
Why?
why I
Because you
didn't think
can't
about it.
imagine them making a cup of tea in space.
Well, I thought it'd be some kind of instant situation where you wouldn't actually have a tea bag. I don't know. It just seems like take up quite a bit of space.
Tea leaves would be a real pain in space.
Yeah, you have an instant tea drink or something that you just kind of, I don't know, isn't it everything
There is
instant?
instant tea, isn't there? I remember instant tea.
See the headlines as they happen and watch BBC News live in the app and get the full story with bbc.co.uk/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.